will forever be a legend here at Tottenham. It's a massive club. Everything I do is for the long term.
And still Ricky Villa. What a fantastic run. He scored.
Gascoigne going to have a crack. He is, you know. Oh, he's there.
Here's Lucas Moura. Oh, they've done it. The wait for silverware is over.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Tottenham Way podcast. This one is being recorded shortly after the unthinkable occurred in North London. Spurs lost at home again. That's not unthinkable. That's become commonplace. But we've lost to West Ham United. Dr. Tottenham, who went to the South Coast and ended Bournemouth's 11-match winless streak in the Premier League, has now gone and given the perfect remedy to West Ham United, their first win in 11. They were calling it El Sacico. Nuno's been there before, of course, got sacked after losing at home to Manchester United a few years ago, making a very questionable substitution in the process involving Lucas Moura. Well, all sorts of similarities today with the substitution that Thomas Frank made. Whether that's going to lead to his dismissal remains to be seen. I'm Marcus Buckland in the company of George Sessions from the Press Association. Now, we're recording this about 5 hours after the final whistle. For now, at least, no announcements from the club, no sackings, no confidence-boosting messages from those in charge. There is still plenty of time, of course, for that to happen. George, we'll talk about the performance in a moment, but where do you think this leaves Thomas Frank? You were one of the journalists who spoke to him afterwards, came up with a couple of excellent questions, including one about the substitution. Is he going to survive after yet another defeat? That's defeat number 8 in 14 games, and the home record is beyond being a joke now, of course.
Oh, Marcus, it's a hard one, isn't it? It is. God, it feels like Groundhog Day. I can't even speak. I'm that flabbergasted. It feels like Groundhog Day over and over again. Look, I have to say, I think we've all kind of said the same message that, you know, we think Vinai's behind Thomas Frank and they want to give him time, and look, maybe he does get the Borussia Dortmund game, but I do feel like it feels like he's the closest he's ever been to going, I think, now. I think after the Fulham game, I kind of wondered, oh God, he's had some really bad ones there. The Arsenal defeat was terrible, Chelsea, and now you've lost at home to Fulham and fan base has gone crazy. And obviously he got through that spell. But we're 2 months on and it's the same story, isn't it? Tottenham are not winning games. They're losing more games now than they're even drawing. They don't look like scoring goals from open play, really, do we? If we're being truthful, you know, the goals they score at the minute are set pieces, or like in this match against West Ham, a good ball to the back post and Romero's scored. But you know, what's Romero doing up there in the first place? You know, brilliant. He's taking it on himself to score that goal, but surely that's not the plan, right? To be putting in balls to the back post for Kolo Muani, who's not great in the air, for Wilson Odobert, who's not the tallest, for Tel, for Xavi. There's no attacking plan, is there? And I think what kind of feels a little bit different on this whole, the last 24 hours, I guess, because, you know, I was thinking this has been a really good week for Thomas Frank. Signed Conor Gallagher. John Heitinger's come in and by all accounts he's led that. So, you know, clearly he's been backed in both those, you know, circumstances. But the bit that was missing was the result. And he's faced a West Ham team that had not won in the Premier League in 10 matches. And he's lost 2-1. And I think what struck me at full time was that, of course, you know, before full time, they're chanting the South Stand, you know, you're getting sacked in the morning. You know, I can't remember that ever happening to any of the other Tottenham managers that I've seen in my lifetime, to be perfectly honest, let alone covering the club. But at full time, Thomas Frank kind of goes over and politely applauds certain areas of the ground, is booed doing so, which is obviously not nice, but, you know, that is the life of a manager, unfortunately. And he walks down the tunnel, and then interestingly enough, the South Stand applaud Mickey van der Ven. They applaud Lucas Bergvall, they applaud Yves Bissouma, and they applaud Pedro Porro. And it just made me think, you know, if you're Vinai, if you're the Lewis family, and you're looking at that moment, I think you realise in that moment that, you know, Thomas Frank is not to blame for all of this. Clearly, there's loads of issues there. but the frustration right now and the toxic nature of the atmosphere, I think it is down to Thomas Frank. The fans were behind the players then, and they were behind the players in the game. As bad as that first half was, they really rallied and they got behind the team. They're just not behind the manager. And I said a little while back, probably a month or so back, with Thomas Frank, it comes a point where is he doing more harm than good? And I think he is doing more harm than good. And that's why I feel it is now just a matter of time before he goes. Is it before Dortmund? I'm not sure, but I don't think there's any way back for him, really.
Well, I'm interested to hear you say that the South Stand were reporting those players, and Pedro Porro in particular. We'll come on to the individual nature of the performance shortly. I just felt that some players today were so far below the levels required. And as much as ultimately it's the manager who has to get the blame, I'm afraid that when some supposedly quality footballers are performing as poorly as they have been, I'm not quite sure what the manager is meant to do, particularly going forward. I know that Thomas Frank afterwards bemoaned the lack of a cutting edge in attack. He said the same thing after the Bournemouth game. Spurs are not scoring goals from open play. You make a very good point. There seems to be no coherent strategy towards breaking down the opposition from open play. But when we do get the ball into the box, be it occasionally from a good pass or from a corner, Spurs had 11 corners today. We've got a good record this season, supposedly, of scoring from set pieces. West Ham, an awful record when it comes to defending corners in particular. I cannot recall one corner that Spurs produced today that actually had a real cutting edge to it. And to some degree, of course, it's the manager's fault. But the players themselves, George, I just thought really let themselves down. Certainly a handful of them did. But before we go on to that, I just want to go back to what you said about it being a good week in some ways for Thomas Frank. The fact that he led the negotiations, by all accounts, he was integral in persuading Conor Gallagher to come to Spurs rather than to Aston Villa. That John Heitinga comes in as his assistant and that this is a move that Frank has welcomed. We've also had the open letter from Vinai, supposedly claiming that everyone's aligned. That's certainly what Thomas Frank said. He picked up 6 to 8 positive points about the club being aligned. It's a super tanker that's gradually turning. I think you can argue it's a super tanker that's already taken on far too much water and is about to sink. But the fact that he played that role in the arrival of Conor Gallagher and is backing Heitinga, surely it would look even more ridiculous that they then sack him. Okay, they've lost to West Ham, which is awful, and few people thought that they were going to lose to West Ham, but it was always a possibility. There'd be no joined up thinking, surely, if the Spurs hierarchy now quotes panic and sack him.
I think I'd have to push back on it was always a possibility to lose to West Ham because they've not won in 10 games. Bournemouth hadn't won in 11 games. Look, this is the run where Thomas Frank turns it around. I've asked him numerous questions over the last few weeks, and he's always defiant, in fairness to him, and he's faced a lot of tough questions. So I have to give him a lot of credit for not snapping and being respectful in his answers. And he says a lot of the same things. When we will get wins, I've no doubt about it. And when we do, that's when the fans will be behind us. But where is the win coming from? If you can't beat a Bournemouth team that have not won in 11, and you can't beat a West Ham team not won in 10, and you can't beat a Sunderland team with 6 players at the AFCON, where is the win coming from? They go away to Burnley in a week's time, and Burnley just got a draw at Liverpool. That's not a 3-pointer, is it anymore? And we all know the run of games after that: Man City, Man United, Newcastle, Arsenal. Obviously got Dortmund on Tuesday. This is the thing. Under Thomas Frank, I just struggle to see where the win is coming from, and I think he would take any win right now. But I got to ask you, Marcus, if Spurs win that game today, 2-1. Are you walking away from that stadium buzzing and jubilant and excited about the future? Or are you thinking about that first half and how shambolic Tottenham looked again in the first half? And look, Thomas Frank's got a lot of injuries, admittedly, but there is some quality players on that pitch. Mickey van der Ven's a quality player. Romero is. Xavi's a sort of a fully fledged Netherlands international with so much experience. Kolumani I thought was terrible today, but how much experience has he got? These are not bad players, are they? I just think they're in a system which is not getting the best out of them, and they're devoid of confidence. And that's where I point the finger at Thomas Frank, because his he's not getting the best out of this group of players, and that was his job. He come in this summer to improve the squad, to improve the culture. Tom Warnock's made some brilliant points in recent pods about that, and he's not done any of that. And it's not like he's been there for 15 games. He's been there 32 games now. I believe he's got the lowest win rate of any Tottenham manager. So it's hard to kind of. I get what you're saying about the board. It's not a great look for the board if they get rid of him now. But then, having said that, Vinai's statement, as much as I thought it was really good of him to come out and address the fans like that, and there was lots of key points in there that he addressed, he didn't actually mention Thomas Frank and give him any backing, I didn't think. And that felt kind of notable to me, because I've always felt, and we all feel, that Vinai is the real one behind Thomas Frank. He's the one that's kind of given him this time. But he acknowledged that the men's first team, their season's fallen short, and didn't say that, we have full trust in Thomas. And there's just certain little things over the last 24 hours. I kind of wonder, if the faith in Thomas, inside the club, is dwindling, and it's very close now.
I just think that the timing of his statement was very strange, because, if they're seriously thinking of sacking the manager, and, there's always a chance you're going to lose a football match. So when he writes that, he has to know that the way Spurs are playing at home, in particular against West Ham, we might lose the game. So don't put the statement out now. I want to, on one hand, say I'm glad he did, because we've been calling for it. We want more communication from the top of the club. We never used to get that when Daniel Levy was in charge. But I thought that, the timing of it was curious, with such a big game coming up and such a big week, really, with Dortmund and then Burnley as well. I have to say, having read the statement, I mean, it's lots of words that sort of appease, but mean absolutely nothing. And not least the first headline, player trading. I mean, is this some American corporate PR stunt? It's transfers. It's not player trading. The moment I saw that, I'm thinking, come on a minute. And then you talk about, yes, it's important to get more players in, et cetera, et cetera. We're looking to restructure things as far as wages are concerned. That's been the big bugbear for a number of years. But then he goes on to talk about how important the academy is. Of course, the academy is important. Of course, it's important to get players in. Yes, player support and development, et cetera, et cetera. Mentions all these people who are coming in. Rafi Merson's going to be the director of football operations, whatever that means. We've got Dan Lewington as the performance director. Johnny Heidinger's come in, having just been the manager of Ajax and won only 5 of his 15 games in charge. He's been a coach at West Ham recently. I'm not quite sure where the logic of his appointment comes from. I was not convinced. Oh, and then, yes, we really want to bond with the supporters, etc., etc. Well, again, stop making that statement now, when the biggest issue at the moment, George, is that the supporters are not happy with the manager. Wait and see. So I just think the timing of it was wrong. I just get this impression, and we touched upon it last time, nobody quite seems to know what is going on. And somebody's got to make a decision. But if you're right, and he's as close now as ever to going, what are they going to do? Who are they going to bring in? And whoever it is, short term or not, do you try and spend some money for them? Or are we all going down that longer feeling that really, if they had their way, they'd keep Thomas Frank for as long as possible, maybe ditch him in March or something and have an interim to the summer, and then point to the World Cup and one manager in particular who's looking to come back to Spurs if he possibly could after it, and that's Mauricio Pochettino. So what on earth do they do if they decide to sack him this weekend?
Just to quickly go back to the Vinai statement, I understand where you're coming from with that. I think some of the concerns that I've had lately, and why I've wanted him to, Vinai in particular, to speak is it's just to kind of acknowledge that this season hasn't been good enough, and he did that. He spoke about the disconnect between the fan base, and I'm glad that he has recognised that, and he's actually vocalised it as well. And also, I guess, mentioning the wages. The wages have been a big issue. And I think Tom Barkley mentioned how potentially wages before with Conor Gallagher was an issue. So look, that is a sign that the Lewis family and ENIC and Vinai are trying to back this, not just Thomas Frank, but this kind of Tottenham squad to get them back to where they need to be. And also Vinai did mention, he didn't mention senior concessions, which was certainly notable that was missing, but he did mention improving, the kind of the certain logistics with tickets for younger fans, and I think they're all key aspects that did need to be addressed. But yeah, going back to your point, who does come in? I mean, Heitinger, I didn't really think, to be honest. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I was just in cuckoo land, but I didn't actually think of him coming in as potentially being a possible interim. But to be honest, that does seem likely now, right? You know, he's been a manager before. He's really, really highly respected for his work at Liverpool last season. Yes, he was at West Ham before, but he was at Liverpool last season, and I'm not saying he's the reason why the wheels have fallen off at Liverpool, but I think there is a feeling that they have missed him. And Arne Slot brought in somebody else to be his assistant or to be part of his coaching team, and I can't think who that is off the top of my head. But they left, I think, pretty early on. So Johnny Heitinger is respected in the game. Clearly, this Ajax spell didn't go well. His second spell, it should be said, he had an interim spell a couple of years back and did very well then. But I think he, I guess, is the obvious candidate that they'd turn to. He's got a UEFA Pro license first of all. There isn't many other. There's no sort of wonder interim waiting like Michael Carrick for Man United or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Xavi gets spoken about. Obviously did a pretty decent job at Barcelona, and Tom Holland be more dialed into how good he was at Barcelona, but he did win La Liga, and it was the first time they'd won it in 4 years, I believe, and did leave under a bit of a cloud. It seemed like the job was causing him undue stress, and it's obviously a massive football club. I think, like you, the thing that I just get back to right now is there's such a disconnect between the fan base and the club, and I have to be honest, maybe it's a lazy idea, but it feels like one of the only people in the world that is going to instantly change that is Mauricio Pochettino. It has to be said. I feel like out of all the managers in the world that could come after Thomas Frank, no manager will get more time than Mauricio Pochettino from the Spurs fan base, because we know how good it was before, and that's the key thing. There was evidence of what he did before, but even when he had his tough spell and he come through it, there was green shoots, and I kind of go full circle back to Thomas Frank. There's just no evidence that this is turning around. The numbers are horrendous now. I think 2 Premier League wins in 13. Was it 8 defeats in 14? You said
Yes.
3 defeats in a row. 5 wins in 21, I think it is now. So that there is just nothing to hang your hat on and say, okay, Thomas Frank is doing this. And look, even today, if we get into sort of the game a bit more, taking off Matisse Tell when he did, it's a crazy decision. Tell was one of the only players in that first half actually demanding the ball, getting on it, trying to make things happen. He produced a wonderful outside of the boot cross, which Spurs should have scored from. Odegaard was denied, and Jed Spence. And he did a really poor corner about 2 or 3 minutes before. And I hope that wasn't the reason, the sort of clincher for why Thomas Frank took him off. But it made no sense whatsoever, because Wilson Odegaard, as much as I've willed him to do well, he was, again, not impressive today.
No.
He takes Tell off, and then he puts Wilson Odegaard on the left and puts Kolo Muani right wing. So it's not to balance the team and to put Kolo Muani out on the left. And me and Tom talked about the substitutions last week. And I forgot to mention, actually, that his substitution in the Aston Villa game also kind of killed the momentum, where he took Xavi out from the number 10 role, where he was absolutely thriving, and pushed him to the left and put Dane Scarlett on, and then Spurs didn't have a chance. And look, if we're truthful today, when he takes Tell off and he puts Dom Solanke on, obviously everyone cheered Dom Solanke, but the Tell decision got booed, and Tell's furious, and I completely understand why he was furious, because he's looking at Kolo Muani, he's looking at Odegaard and saying, how are you guys staying on the pitch above me? But yeah, Spurs went to 4-4-2, and I can't really remember many chances that they created from Romero scoring, which was obviously 2 minutes after the substitution. After that, they changed formation, and I think Xavi had a shot saved. I can't off the top of my head, Marcus, think of any chances Spurs created. So even that substitution killed the kind of momentum, because Spurs had it there. They were getting closer.
There were some scrambles.
It just comes back to it. I don't think Thomas Frank is getting the best out of this group of players, and
I agree with that, George.
And
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying to a large degree. And yeah, there were a few scrambled moments after the substitutions, but it was the same as against Aston Villa. We had that period when we'd score and we were really on top of them, and then the momentum seemed to go when he made those changes. And I mean, I heard his answer to, I think it was your question, wasn't it? Why did you take Tell off? He said, "Well, I've got to take one of the attacking players off." And then he said something about Odegaard might be better on the. I don't know. I couldn't understand what he was saying about Odegaard because I don't know what Odegaard was doing all afternoon. To be honest, I do not know what role he was meant to be performing, what position he was in. But it's extraordinary that a manager can get a substitution as wrong as that. So that really does concern me. Just going back to what you were saying before, yeah, in terms of it all points towards Pochettino if and when the change is made. And I think Spurs, they're not going to be inundated with quality choice in the summer. We're not going to be in Europe next season. I think we're going to lose one of, if not both, of Romero and Van der Ven. It's going to be a complete rebuild. And hopefully, Pochettino, I think he would be up for that sort of challenge. Very few other high profile managers are going to be. But when you then say to me there's lots of quality on the pitch, I'm sorry, but I look at that starting 11 today. George, I mean, Vicario, good shot stopper. Several people actually pointed this out during our Q&A last week, and I hadn't fully appreciated it prior to that. His distribution is appalling, and he takes forever to make up his mind. And then finally, he passes the ball 5 yards to the right to Romero, who gives it back to him, and he passes it 5 yards to the left to Van der Ven, who will look to play the ball forward, realizes he can't, will give it back to Vicario. Nothing happens. And we've also seen with the winning goal from West Ham tonight that he's still fragile at set pieces. And he goes chasing after the referee, as he does every single time he concedes a goal from a set piece. And for a moment, we all thought we were going to get away with it when the VAR thing went up. Actually, all that did was give West Ham fans the opportunity basically to cheer another goal when it was confirmed that it had gone in. But I'm going to pick out several players here, but let's start with Vicario because we have suggested in the past couple of weeks or so that maybe the time has come to give Kinski a run. That'll be the only way we ever find out for sure how good he is. So based on what happened again today, and I know he made a couple of great saves, he could have been 3-0 down. We know he's a good shot stopper, but there are so many vulnerabilities in his game. Has the time come for Frank or whoever takes over to experiment in goal?
I guess to try and be snappy with this, do I think Vicario will be Tottenham's first choice goalkeeper next season? I don't think I do. Is Kinski good enough to play now? I don't think he is. If he was, then Thomas Frank plays him against Aston Villa, which is obviously a massive game for him, but he doesn't. So if Kinski can't play in the FA Cup against Aston Villa, which is obviously, not a game that hinges on Frank's future because he's survived that week and that match, but if Thomas Frank's not playing him in that game, he doesn't trust him. And look, just to kind of, I've got to say, the Kinski sums up where Spurs are going wrong. I'll be totally honest. Last January, they've got Josh Keeley on loan at Leyton Orient, who's a young goalkeeper that's come to the club, extremely highly rated, doing wonderful things at Leyton Orient, and everyone thinks, "Oh, we've got a real player here." And when they get an injury to obviously Vicario, they decide to spend 12.5 million on Kinski, and you basically then tell Josh Keeley, you've got no chance because this is another player that takes the non-homegrown slot. And I would hazard a guess, in 10 years' time, Josh Keeley has played more Premier League games than Anton Kinski. So why would you sign Kinski in that situation for 12.5 million, by the way, which is quite a hefty sum for a 20-year-old, a 21-year-old goalkeeper that's not got that much experience. Look, he had one very good game against Liverpool in his debut. And then I've mentioned before, he made countless mistakes in that second half of the season, which often get forgotten. And look, Vicario was not good today for that winning goal. He was obviously moaning about it, but we've seen that plenty of times. And I thought Spurs looked really vulnerable today from set pieces. And genius or not, I did turn to Alistair Gold on my left when that corner got given to West Ham, and I said, I've got a bad feeling about this. They've been dangerous all game, and lo and behold, they score. So look, I think Vicario, as much as I have a lot of respect for him as a man and for his journey, and I love his mentality, I think he is almost, he's not as divisive a figure as Thomas Frank at the minute, but he is kind of symptomatic of where this is going wrong, isn't it? He takes so long on the ball. The groans inside Tottenham Hotspur Stadium happen when he gets on the ball and he doesn't pass to anyone. And look, that's not always his fault. Sometimes there's not an option, but there's just a whole lack of urgency and a lack of intensity about this team. And Vicario sums it up. And he made some brilliant first half saves. And if he doesn't, it's probably 2-3-0 at half time. But I think more and more we're getting to that point where we realise he's probably not going to be at Tottenham for too much longer. I think certainly not for the long term. I think they will look to move him on in the summer. But having said all that, I don't think he'll be coming out of the firing line anytime soon, because I just don't think Kinski's up to it. I really don't.
Well, there's a big question mark over him. Romero scores the goal, but again, I look at his body language, George, and it's like standing football with Romero. He gets the ball, almost got his hands on his hips, and he's looking up. I guess maybe you can blame the fact that nothing's happening in front of him, but the momentum always seems to go out of any move when Romero has the ball. Even Van der Ven, I mean, wonderful crunching challenge late on again today, but I just sense that Van der Ven's heart has gone out of the club and that Romero is going a little bit rogue. I think his 8th yellow card today, so he's heading towards yet another ban. When he was at his best and his most responsible last season, those yellow cards were not happening. So, we've got a doubt over the goalkeeper. I think both the centre-backs, who are, arguably our best and most important players, fancy going somewhere else. Davis comes in today, gets injured, so he's gone off after 19 minutes. And I've got to say that Jed Spence, who I was so excited about when he burst into the team, is looking increasingly vulnerable. He's always trying his little tricks and everything else. There's a time for that, but not when you're deep in your own half. And there's always been the question mark about how effective he is going forward. So I take your point, by the way, that if Thomas Frank's meant to be improving players, he certainly hasn't improved Jed Spence. And on the other side of the defence, I'm sorry, but Pedro Porro is regressing more alarmingly than anyone. And I know that he's got the assist today and he whipped in one other very dangerous ball. But, I mean, he had plenty of corners, plenty of crosses, plenty of free kicks to have an effect. And defensively, he keeps getting caught out. I also feel that his body language is not good, George. There was a period today when he and Xavi were screaming at each other just before half-time. They're obviously on different wavelengths, and we'll come on to Xavi in a moment. But Porro, who seems to play just about every game, is also, for me, a glaring vulnerability. So suddenly we put red line through the whole of the defence, which was meant to be an asset under Thomas Frank.
I think this kind of goes back to my point. All these players, I think they're good players. I don't think they're top five. I don't think all of them are top 4, top 5 players, Champions League quality players, but they're good players and they don't seem happy, do they? Let's be fair. Jed Spence came on today. He had a face like thunder. And I can't remember when was the last time he started a game. It was Ben Davis has been preferred, hasn't he, for this little run, which feels telling. And I don't think Jed can really argue with that. I don't think he's been good enough lately, but he comes on and has got a face like thunder. Romero's done an interview after the game with the club today. The first time I've ever seen him do an interview in English with the club. And I've got some of his quotes in front of me, actually. And even these quotes for me, Marcus, tell me what you think about this. But it feels sort of pointed, this, and maybe I'm just reading into it because I'm sort of so paranoid about everything at the minute. But Romero said, obviously he said lose a game at home. He obviously means another lost game at home. For me, only one message for the fans. Thank you for always staying with us. It is difficult and also a disaster moment for us, but especially in this moment, we need silence. Back tomorrow in training, work hard every day and stay together. In 3 days, we have another big match, and this moment is really silence and work hard. I mean, he's calling this a disaster, and yet we've got Thomas Frank's turn around and saying we are I'm turning around a super tank, and I've got the faith of everyone, calling it a transitional season. I mean, I have to say, with the transitional season, we've heard that mentioned a lot. None of us said that in the summer, by the way, when João Palhinha signed and Xavi Simons signed and Randall Colomwani signed and Mohamed Kudus signed. They're all players with Champions League quality. They've played tons of games. We all thought this is 4 players that could potentially start. It's only because Spurs are doing so bad, it's now become a transitional season. If there was a transitional season, it was last season. Lucas Bergwijn, 18-year-old. Archie Gray signed 18-year-old. Wilson Odegaard, 19-year-old. John Solanke was a good signing, but Timo Werner on loan. Last season was the transitional season. This was the season when you signed 4 players with pedigree and Champions League quality, and they improved the squad. And it's gone off the rails, isn't it? Spurs are 14th, but what are they, 9 points off 4th? There's no chance in hell they get top 4. And now we're looking behind us at relegation.
No, we are. We are. For the first time, George, having lost this game today, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, we could be in trouble. If we lose at Burnley next week, and then you look at the fixtures coming, and if we replicate the results against the teams coming up from earlier this season, and you take away well, it was a great result at Manchester City, but even though we've got a great record against them at home, no one's going to expect us to beat them in a couple of weeks' time. And West Ham get on a bit of a roll, we actually might be in a relegation scrap. And then I look at some of the players, and I'm not going to shame them all, but Odegaard, who I hear is amazing in training. They all say he's the greatest player in the world on the training pitch, but for whatever reason, when he rocks up at White Hart Lane, he freezes. And Xavi, he's the big signing, the £62 million signing, who I understand was limping through the neutral zone after the game today. Well, frankly, he was limping through the match. He hasn't got the pace. He hasn't got the power. He doesn't even have the awareness. He's meant to be at the fulcrum of everything that's good with Spurs. And there are brief moments when he flourishes. But honestly, based on today, he's not the answer. George, I really do now start to worry. I mean, I don't think we'll get relegated. It's not impossible. 10-point gap at the moment between us and West Ham. But what happens to the rest of this season? It just drifts away. We lose some of the best players. Even one of our brighter youngsters, Tell, is infuriated by the substitution, wants to get away before the end of the month. No one seems to really know what's going to happen with the manager. I'm sorry. I am down in the dumps because it's not just now, George. For me, suddenly, the next year, the next 2 years offers very little. And here we are back just a few months ago in the summer when the new family, well, it's the same family, but different parts of them came in suggesting they were going to splash the cash. We seem to have regressed beyond belief. And I don't think any of us have got an answer, really, have we, as to what should happen, other than, well, Frank out, which is the easy and it's the logical suggestion. But thereafter, what?
I agree with you on Xavi. I thought this was one of his poor games. I'm a fan of him. I think there's a player there, I really do. And I think in the right system, under someone like Mauricio Pochettino, I think he'll flourish and he'll, he relishes getting on the ball, but no one plays a progressive pass to him other than Romero. But he's passing through the opposition's midfield, and 9 times out of 10 that's getting intercepted at the minute. No, look, I understand where you're coming from. It's been a tough 18 months, hasn't it, to be a Tottenham fan? God.
Yes.
But the thing is, and I know that this squad needs work, absolutely. But last season was the first time in I think 16 years we'd finished outside the top 8. So it's not like there is quality in here. There really is. There's a lot of injuries. Have to give Thomas Frank that. He's missing a big number of players. He did sell one of his only attackers, by the way, Brennan Johnson. This was part of my gripe. Selling him at the start of the window, sell him at the end of the window, and he plays against Borussia Dortmund on Tuesday, and he plays against Frankfurt. Now Tottenham have barely got an 11 they can put out because of ineligibility and injuries. But look, I think everyone feels down in the dumps right now. I have to say, I do think that Vinai, if given time, I do honestly think he's a very good person. He knows the inner workings of a football club. I certainly think he would benefit from having someone around him that understands Tottenham, because I think that's something that is potentially missing in that board of executives, that understands what it is that makes Tottenham Tottenham. I'm talking about the style of football and the DNA of the club, and the Bill Nicholsons and Keith Birkinshaws and Dave Mackay's. I think that is missing. I think the club have massively underestimated the style of football when it came to appointing Thomas Frank in the summer, and look, I think we can all agree Vinai made a big mistake hiring Thomas Frank alongside Daniel Levy, it should be said.
No, it was
What
Daniel's
Vinai is
parting
doing,
gift.
yeah, I think Daniel probably would have sacked him by now, to be fair. So,
Oh, yes, I think he would have done. He's very
but
good
I
at getting
think
with other people.
what Vinai is doing behind the scenes is he's hiring a lot of elite people. It has to be said. We saw this week it announced that Rafi Mawson's coming from the City Football Group. I think Dan Lewinden's coming from the City Football Group as well as a performance director. There's plenty of other names that are coming in, but they're sort of escaping me off the top of my head. But he is bringing in a lot of people that know what it takes to run an elite football club, not just a team, an actual club. And I honestly do think, given time, he will turn Tottenham around. And at this point in time, I have to say I do have faith in the Lewis family. I really do. They've signed Conor Gallagher early on in this window. Very rarely do we see a real quality player come in. And look, he's not had the finest debut today, but he's surrounded, by rubbish essentially, isn't he?
But George, you say,
everyone feels like rubbish.
You say he's a high quality player. He's a good player. But, I spoke to my source in La Liga. I've spoken to a few people who've watched him play for Chelsea and for Crystal Palace. They say he's a good player. He's not an elite player. If Spurs really are showing ambition, they should be aiming higher than Conor Gallagher. Would you not agree that if Spurs develop as they should over the next couple of years, Conor Gallagher should be no more than a player on the bench? So I'm happy with the signing. Don't get me wrong. In the current scenario, Spurs have. I mean, actually, I got chided the other day for suggesting that Harry Redknapp would be a great answer for a few months just to boost everybody's confidence levels. Thomas Frank himself today said we are down to the bare bones. Now that's a Harry Redknapp quote. So there we go. And Gallagher, of course, is going to help. I'm not going to get that excited though by that level of signing, and from a financial point of view, he's just equaled out what we got for Brennan Johnson. Is that the level of our ambitions at the moment? We need it. What we need, and I know it's almost impossible, we need someone who knows how to score goals, because it's this constant lack of threat in front of goal. And for all the left back position's a bit weak. It's all the weaker now because Davis has gone out. So we're bringing in a 19-year-old. Conor Gallagher can do a few different jobs in midfield. We can't score goals. You take the 10 goals out that our two centre-backs have scored, and we really are in a relegation dogfight somehow. And I mean, Solanke may never regain the sort of form that he showed before. He's certainly going to take a long time to get fit again. I think we've all given up with Kolo Muani, whose first touch is non-existent. I've never even seen his second touch because he can't get the first touch under control. He's still not scored in the Premier League. Odebear doesn't look to me like he'll score in a month of Sundays. Tell's got that little bit of oomph about him, but he wants to leave. This is why Gallagher, he did okay today, but we need more than that in the next couple of weeks, don't we? Or are we just thinking, no, we'll trawl through until the summer and take stock after that?
The only thing I'd say with Conor Gallagher is, does he start in a Champions League, top four team regularly? Maybe he doesn't, but Tottenham obviously are not that right now. They're a team which I think probably should be seventh, I'd say, if things are going well. Sixth if they have a good run. And I think he's a player that comes in and helps you do that. So you can't, Spurs can't sign the champagne signing when at the minute the football's lemonade, isn't it? So I have some sympathy in terms of the owners have seen that there's clearly an area where it needs investment, and they've got probably as good a player as you can get, I think, in this window that's available, that's going to come in and instantly boost the first team. And Conor Gallagher wasn't great today. I think once he's actually got up to speed, because he hasn't started that many games this season, you have to remember, he will look better. And I don't think he was brilliant this season for Atletico Madrid. I think he was pretty impressive last season from what I hear, but I would judge him more on his time at Chelsea and his time at Crystal Palace, because his numbers at both of those clubs, and I watched him week in, week out at Palace, I know how good he can be. And look, he's not the progressive passer that Tottenham are clearly lacking, but he can bring a bite, and he brings energy, and he brings kind of a commitment and a real high pressure, which I think is lacking at times, which once he's up and running, I think he'll make a big difference. And Tottenham are not going to get relegated, I don't think. But if they do become in a relegation scrap, Conor Gallagher will be a man up for the fight. And look, I guess we're sort of clutching at what can we look forward to. But it only does take one manager and it transforms everything. How bad were Tottenham under Tim Sherwood? Do you remember in 2013-14? The club seemed a mess. The 7 signings we'd made when Gareth Bale was sold, none of them had worked out. I think people were saying Jan Vertonghen was useless. Christian Eriksen, send him back. Mauricio Pochettino come in and he had some pain early on, but he got it going. And it just shows you a manager that is sort of backed by the club and backed by the players and backed by the fans. They can achieve something. Doesn't feel like Thomas Frank's ever going to have that anymore. So,
No.
How long has he got? We don't know. But even if he does get through this week, it's hard to see it really turn around. But I do think it only takes one brilliant manager that raises the parts of the sums, and things will look bright again for Tottenham. But obviously, understandably, after the last 12 months of 4 Premier League wins at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they're still winless, aren't they? In 2026, we're understandably down in the dumps. But there is a big game coming up against Borussia Dortmund on Tuesday night, and who knows what the atmosphere will be like. But it is a big game. Spurs do need to win that if they want top 8.
I know what the atmosphere will be like. It'll be relatively buoyant for 10 minutes, and then we'll concede a goal, and it will be toxic again because they're in good form, Dortmund. I hate to be a cynic. I can't see Spurs winning that game. I do want to ask you about one player who I did not think I would see in a Spurs shirt again, and who wasn't ever meant to be in a Spurs shirt again. And it sums up the levels of confusion that we find ourselves in, the dysfunctional nature of this football club. But Bissouma comes on at half time, and I actually thought he played well in the second half. I mean, are we now talking about him having a big role to play in the second half of the season?
Well, he can't play on Tuesday, unfortunately, because he wasn't included in the Champions League squad. So that's one more player down. But I guess it sums up where Thomas Frank is, where Tottenham are. I think probably me and both Tom Barkley and Tom Warner have probably all written that Yves Bissouma has played his last game for Spurs. What was the recent incident? Another laughing gas incident, wasn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
He obviously got disciplined in the summer for repeated lateness. I think that wasn't it?
Yes.
Been so many with Yves.
And he's just come back from a red card at the. He's just come back from a red card in AFCON as well. So, you can't trust the guy. But and that's the frustration for me. He's let us down so many times, but actually he's got a lot of ability, obviously.
Well, to be honest, he's probably he is. It's not this is factual. He's the best passer in that Tottenham midfield. There's no doubt about it. And if he is locked in, as we saw at times under Ange, he can be a wonderful footballer. And look, he's going to have to be used, I think, given the injuries at the minute. Hopefully Archie Gray's isn't too bad, but he was in pain towards the end of that first half. He went flying into a few challenges, trying to make his mark. And he looked, he was obviously really struggling. João Palhinha didn't play today because of an injury. There was so much to ask Thomas Frank. We didn't get around to asking him about that in the press conference. And look, Yves Bissouma came on, had 2 shots, I think, on target, didn't he, in the first sort of 15, 20 minutes? I mean, more than Spurs had all in the first half, or maybe the same number in the first half. So he will bring something, Yves. He'll bring vibes, I think, to a dressing room which probably needs it at the minute. And it is down to the bare bones to this Dortmund game. I think the way the rules are with UEFA, I think Tell will have to come out for this game because Solanke is now fit. Unfortunately, Solanke is probably not fit to start, I would guess. So it really leaves me looking at what could be Tottenham's team, and I'm struggling. I got to say, I think you're sort of praying that João Palhinha is fit, but if he's not, I kind of was writing it down earlier. Because by the way, Marcus, Mickey van der Ven is suspended on Tuesday just to
what? I'd forgotten that. I had forgotten. Oh my god. So hang on. Let's try and what is your starting 11? Are there actually, what position are you playing, George? Because I don't think you're cut tight. Seriously, what are we going to play on Tuesday then?
So this is the team at the minute. I think that it has to be, but this is probably not what you want, really. Vicario, Porro, Romero, Danso, Spence, Bergval, Palhinha. Let's obviously rely on Palhinha being fit. Odeberg, Xavi, Kolomwani, and then Solanke. Because I mean, I don't think he's going to start Dane Scarlett, and you've got Udogi, but how fit is he? Do you bring in? You can't even play Dragusin because he's not in the squad.
And I
I'm trying
wanted
to
to
look
double
down.
check with you, because in the League Cup this season, there's no one's cup tied. That was the ridiculous thing the other night. But Conor Gallagher presumably cannot play in the Champions League for us either. So really,
Yeah.
yeah, we're in big trouble on Tuesday night. It's almost a write-off game, and
Oh,
then
I
just
mean,
go and win in
the only
Frankfurt.
the only thing I would say is it will mean some younger players on the bench. So Luca Williams, Barnett, Teenan Thompson, who I know is training with the first team this week. They're really exciting 17-year-olds. Done brilliant things for the youth team this season. Look, they're going up against Borussia Dortmund potentially, or maybe you don't even put them in because it's such a mess of a situation. But they'll be on the bench. I'm 99% sure. Callum Olasesi as well has played for Tottenham before. He came on away to Hoffenheim last season. He's 19 years old. He's got a lot of interest in clubs from overseas, especially. I think he'll probably go out on loan this month, but I'm sure he'll be on the bench. He is a central midfielder. So there is some young options there if Thomas Frank decides to go with that, or if whoever is in charge decides to go with that. And I think, to be totally honest, in that game, if what the attendance is going to be, we don't know. But if you want to kind of leave a mark, bring on Luca Williams Barnett, because I would bet my house that kid will do something to get people off their feet. And at the minute, this team is lacking a bit of
Mm.
creativity, a bit of genius. And look, he's a 17-year-old. You can't ask for too much, but he's got bundles of talent, that boy, and so much confidence and self-belief that I would bet that he would do something in that game if he was given 15 minutes. And look, we're against Dortmund. They know all about blood and young players, so
Yeah,
might not be
no,
the
well, you're
worst way
right.
to go.
Got nothing to lose there. If Frank is still in charge, then that could almost be a legacy that he at least gave one or two of those youngsters an opportunity on one of the biggest stages. Just on the subject of team lineups, I hear that the Spurs starting 11 was leaked on social media. Not the first time it's happened in the game, as Thomas Frank himself said, and in fact, not the first time it's happened at Spurs, because Ange last season was talking about a mole within the club. What is your reading of that situation? Does it further undermine Frank? He said he didn't care, but something untoward is going on behind the scenes.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think it. I don't really care, and I don't really think it matters. To be honest, I think if opposition want to work out what the team is, they'll speak to agents, and enough players share the same agents that they probably could work out that. I don't know. Jed Spence is not starting, so clearly Ben Davis is left back. I think that
Yeah,
there
but
was a
why
lot of
some? But
talk.
why someone leaking that? Why is someone within the club leaking that? It may not be so damaging, but it's still not the right thing to do. Someone's got a grudge of some sort, have they not?
I don't think it would necessarily be someone in the club leaking it because they're annoyed or what have you. I think it would just be general chit chat of players talking to their family and then their family or talking to their agent, and then the agent talks to someone else, and it just it's sort of Chinese whispers, but it happens everywhere. Marcus, I've got to say, Ruben Amorim was kicking up a fuss about it maybe last season or maybe it was this season, and because Man United's team kept getting predicted or kept getting leaked. I've seen it with Arsenal before. It does happen, but what does it really do? Just
Mm.
I feel like West Ham would have known. West Ham had a game plan today. They would have known how they're going to attack Jed Spence or how they're going to attack Ben Davis. I think honestly, and without sort of using Angie's words as a laugh, I think it's a bit of a mountain out of a molehill. I've got to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's. I feel bad. I feel like you've actually done well here, George, to try and lift the spirits a little bit, because I'm as flat as I have been for a long time. I think it's the uncertainty as much as anything else. It's the fact that, again, and I describe myself as having the memory of a goldfish going to the game, George. I was excited today. Spurs West Ham through the years has thrown up some great fixtures. There's a good rivalry between the clubs. I really thought Spurs were going to win today. Even at half time, even 1-0 down, I was pretty sure Spurs were going to win, and when they equalised, I was now certain they were going to win. And then not only did they not win, they lose. And as Thomas Frank said, in these games against the likes of Bournemouth and West Ham, if you can't win them, for God's sake, don't lose them. And they have. So now I take your point that maybe an inspired managerial signing can turn things around very quickly. I do feel sorry for Thomas Frank because I think he's essentially a decent man. He's obviously almost certainly not up to the job now. I think he's been let down by a lot of his players. I just don't quite see where we go from here. But you've been as positive in the circumstances as you can be, and I hope actually one or two of those youngsters do get a go on Tuesday night and give us something to get excited about. I'm about to go and have another very, very big glass of red wine. Is there a final message? I feel like I'm interviewing the manager now. George, is there a final word of support you can give to the fans as we head into the sunset and get ready for what could be a very tough week against Dortmund and Burnley?
Yeah, I think it was Bill Nicholson that said we at Spurs aim so high that even in failure there's an echo of glory. Well, look, Tottenham are still in the Champions League. I'm still dreaming. Who was it that came in at Chelsea and won the Champions League after ABB got sacked? Was it Di Matteo?
Di
Di Matteo's
Matteo,
done nothing. Di Matteo's done nothing since. So
get him in.
I'm
Get
still
Di
dreaming.
Matteo
I'm
in.
still maybe I'm still dreaming of a some sort of crazy uplift. No, look, it is hard to be positive because we have been here last week, the week before, last year. So as I say, it feels like Groundhog Day. But honestly, there is some talent in that squad, and I think somebody will get a tune out of him. And look, it might not be Thomas Frank. And you're right, Marcus. I think we'd all, me and the two Toms would all say he's clearly a really good bloke. He's been asked, honestly, he's been asked a lot of tough questions by all of us, by various other people, and he answers them in a really respectful manner. And not everyone does that. Plenty of managers buy it and don't like being told that things aren't good enough. So I do have a lot of respect for him, and whatever happens, I guess, when he leaves Tottenham, whether that's this month, whether that's at the end of the season, whether it's in 2 years, who knows? He'll get plenty of jobs. You've seen it with other managers. David Moyes failed at Man United and got another job. Nuno failed at Tottenham, done wonders elsewhere. Roy Hodgson at Liverpool. I think it's just one of those scenarios where he's made the step up, and for a number of reasons, it's not worked out. But it doesn't necessarily mean he is a bad coach. In the same way, Nuno wasn't a bad coach. Certain coaches just don't fit a club or the wrong time as well. So I think that would probably be the sort of last message. I'm sure he'll be in charge on Tuesday after all this. But I think if in general for Tottenham, look, it is a tough time. But there is some quality players in there, and I think there will be some green shoots again in the future. I'm sure of it. Maybe not a Champions League win, but we'll take one over the next two fortnights if one does.
Yes,
come
we
along.
would. We would.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
get
All right.
better again.
I hope so. Well, surely it can't get too much worse, but it could. Listen, George, thank you very much. That's George Sessions from the Press Association. If anything happens to Thomas Frank in the next day or two, we will, of course, reconvene for a pod special. But failing that, a couple of us at least will be back after the Dortmund game. And then, of course, it's Burnley away at the weekend. We've got to keep the faith. There were some good, strong words there from George. I am Marcus Buckland. Let's stick together, guys. Come on, you Spurs.